Absolutely.
I also want to jump back to something else because I'm the king of jumping back. Cameron, you mentioned that you were instructor for the Navy SEAL dog unit.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the, well, I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it, but what were some of the exercises or training problems that you guys got to do in that? Actually, I don't really do a lot of interviews. The first guy I've had after Mike.
Oh, really? Cool. That's for me.
I think Mike last year.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right. Hey guys, Az here at Shield Canine, and I'm here with the one and only Cameron Ford. I had the privilege today to watch Cameron work with a lot of detection teams. We had teams here at Michael Nezbeth's Working Canine Seminar. We had Border Patrol,
yep.
Police Canine, Sport Detection, SAR,
yep.
And
agriculture.
Agriculture, yeah. So there was a very wide variety of dogs, and it was really interesting watching Cameron work with the detection dogs. But I personally, guys, don't have a lot of knowledge on the detection side. So when Mike invited me out to see Cameron, I definitely jumped at that opportunity because I've heard his name a lot in the circles of detection work and police canine. So from there, what we're gonna do is I took some notes as Cameron was working, things that I think maybe you guys might want to know. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start by asking Cameron to tell us a little bit about himself and his background.
Okay. So I've been doing dogs now almost 28 years. Started off like most, I was in the U.S. military. Got selected as a dog handler, stationed in Germany of all places, and that kind of exploded what I did from there. I was lucky enough to grow up next to a guy who did canine as a little kid, so I was already seated with dogs. But in the military, being stationed in Germany exposed me to a lot of different dog training. I came back to the States, became a police officer, worked as a police officer in Florida and Texas, and then after that got into the business of having dogs and selling dogs, and that pulled me into the government contract world in which I was training dogs to go overseas, working for companies, and at one point got picked up by a company to be an instructor for the U.S. Navy SEAL program, and did that for a little over 4 years, and then got out and started doing my own business. But the most important thing that my background gave me was understanding science and detection, and that was a really important thing because that wasn't something that people looked at before as in depth as they should have. So now, those opportunities brought me to doing what I do now, which is going out and educating people on detection dogs, on the science of detection dogs, and how that makes them better as a team and understand their dogs better.
For sure. Well, like I said, I don't know a lot about detection, but I've heard his name and detection together for quite a while on social media. So it was definitely a great opportunity to come out and see the work in person and see the thought process and hear Cameron explain things, which obviously if you really want that experience, you guys are going to see it on the video that we have where we show snippets of this Working Canine seminar, the scent detection work and the bite work. But if you obviously want the whole experience, you're going to have to get out to one of his seminars.
Yeah, I love doing them. So if those that are interested can always reach out. I'm sure we'll share something on how to get a hold of me, and they want to come out, I'm happy to do it.
Absolutely. So where can people find you if they want? They're not ready for Cameron yet,
sure.
But they want to keep sampling him a little bit. They
Okay.
want access to Cameron without paying yet for Cameron.
Yep.
Where can they find you?
So the easiest ones is social media on pretty much Facebook or Instagram. It's just at Cameron Ford Canine, K number 9. My website is fordk9k9.com. So Ford, just K number 9.com. And then just go to YouTube. On YouTube, we have a YouTube channel, Ford Canine on YouTube, and I have probably, I think, somewhere between 65, 75 videos on there sharing all kinds of training things and equipment items related to detection.
Yeah, there's a lot of free content on his YouTube channel, guys. I've definitely caught a lot of the videos on that YouTube channel. A lot of value to be had there, and Cameron's always uploading more stuff, so for sure check it out if you have an interest in detection. I think my first question for you after your intro, and that's quite the resume. I think the first question that I have for you is, what is the most memorable event of your career? It can be law enforcement, military, or contractor instructor.
Great question. Most memorable. honestly, there's a friend of mine the gentleman who hired me to go work for the SEAL team program. That opportunity to go do things with dogs that I never thought I would get to go do, and what it did to me, pushing me as a trainer to be better, to do more than just the way we've always done it, is probably one of the best memories to be able to do that. As in other aspects of my career, just being lucky to be stationed in Germany as a military dog handler, that was another major influence in my dog career, because I traveled all over Europe, learned all the different dog programs out there, which then over time I got invited to participate as a dog handler, or going through as a dog handler to the German police dog school, and then made friends with the Dutch police. And then I went to their set dog school, and I still have a friendship with the gentleman that brought me over at that time, and we do stuff together now. So those are some really, not only like good memories, but the memories that brought me forward. It gave me opportunities that I wouldn't have had if I just kind of stayed in doing the same bubble. I did, let's say, 20 years at the same place. By being mobile in a sense and having these opportunities really are great memories that gave me opportunities to share information that I do now with everybody else.
So were you active duty when you got to go through the dog handler school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I was Air Force, active duty. And the Air Force, when I finished my dog school, I got stationed in Germany. And I remember calling my best friend, my mentor at the time, saying, "Oh, I'm bummed out that I was being stationed in Germany." And he's like, "Shut the hell up. You are going to where all the dogs that we do come from. Why would you not want that opportunity?" So I shut up immediately and then took that opportunity, and that was one of the best things that ever happened to me, was be exposed to where a lot of the dog culture comes from.
Yes.
It isn't as strong over in North America as the culture of dogs is in Europe, and to have that opportunity to be around all those people that have it's part of everything they do.
Yes.
Dogs are everything. So that was one of the things I had to take away from that.
I always enjoy working with the elite European trainers, because I find that they have a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
A lot of them do military and police, but then they're also in the sport world.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're competing in the sport world, and many of them at very high levels. So I find that their training is always super well-rounded.
Yes,
so
it definitely is.
It's always very interesting to learn from them. Yeah. So I guess my next question for you would be, okay, you're interested in getting into scent detection or drug detection, bomb detection, whatever. Let's say you're somebody who've said, okay, this is something I want to do. Or maybe you're an agency and you've decided that it's time to get a drug dog and a bomb dog. What are you looking for when you select a dog for detection work?
So one of the things that I share frequently, I do a lot of classes on Canine Cognition, and cognition is basically the dog's strategy to problem solve. So typically what we always did in selecting dogs, because we looked at how strong they were environmentally, which is very important, that they can handle all different types of conditions in their world and still work. We also look heavily at motivation. How much drive do they have? Do they have a lot of drive that motivated for hunting, for possession of a toy, for engagement with a human, all these different things but we never truly looked until more recently at their intelligence, how they learn, how they problem solve. Because as a trainer or the handler, knowing your dog's mind and what strategies it uses to problem solve, is it memory or is it inference, will help you train and understand that dog better. And in that, what I've learned and what I share with others now is I want a dog who's really motivated, but not over the top motivated. Because if they're so crazily motivated, they're also less flexible mentally. And that overdrive, for lack of a better term, inhibits their ability to problem solve, because they're so stimulated, they're not really willing to try something different. And that's very important for a detection dog, because in different environments or different conditions, and the dog has to be willing to, I need to get around this thing to find odor, not just try to keep going through it. So there's aspects of that I share with agencies now, but I want a dog who's very interactive with the fact that they do seek a relationship with me, but I also want them to be independent. The more independent, because I need a dog to work out away from me, or to search an area despite what I do as a handler, because as you got to see, if I go into things with a thought process of, I think it could be over here, and I'm not trusting my dog and that it's over in this way, I need a dog who's strong enough to kind of go against me to say, hey dad, it's over here, despite me wanting to go, no, check over here. So independence, that good motivation, the mental flexibility is one of the biggest ones where I have a dog who will problem solve, because that's a significant portion of what detection is the dog problem solving its environment, looking for a target.
What tests do you like to do to determine if a dog is that type of dog?
So there's numerous tests that are out there, and I would say most places that do the typical subjective testing, which is how much does the dog want the toy, how much will the dog hunt, and how long will they hunt for and under different conditions, not just outside the tall grass, but if I come inside a building with loud noises or different obstacles in the way, how well do they do it there? So those are all very important, all very valid. I do the same things. Where I go different is once I've kind of selected what I like in those categories, and they're strong environmentally, they can handle loud noises and weird people, as far as like someone who's really tall and bulky, or I'm in Las Vegas, so I may have somebody walking down the strip in a robot outfit. So I need a dog that can handle something really weird like that and not want to shut down. So environmental is very important. But once I've selected those categories, then what we do is the cognitive testing, where I'm looking at how they problem solve. So I may let them see me put their favorite toy or food item over here under a cup or a bucket, and then I point to one over on this side. Do they go to where I point, or do they go to where the reward item is? So if they go to where I point, that's really highly collaborative with me, but that's not ideal. If they know where the answer is over here, but they're willing to go to where I point, that's not really a quality that I'm seeking in a detection dog. It's really good quality for certain dogs where you need collaboration with the dog. So, but for detection, where I want the dog to be independent, that's just one of the tests that I do that looks at, are they going to be strong going to the reinforcer or go to where I tell them to go?
That's super interesting. I've never heard that take before, so that's really interesting. For sure, used to the typical testing of environmental testing, ball hunts, and all this type of stuff. But that thing that you just said, that's really fascinating.
Yeah. No, and it's a strategy. Does a dog use you, or does a dog willing to go, I know the answer's there, I'm going to go there? And we do it from puppies to adults. There's cognition for adult dogs and there's cognition for puppies. And there's similarities, but there's differences. But we need to understand how they use their environment, or how they maybe use me, how they strategize. Do they use memory to solve the problem if they see it once or twice, or do they actually go, well, I'm going to try something different than this, or use my nose or my visual aspects? So these are all strategies dogs have to learn their environment and be successful.
It's interesting, because I definitely saw you actually set handlers up by deliberately kind of tricking them into believing something was either there or it wasn't there, and set the handler up so that you could show them that they're either helping their dog too much, or maybe giving too much feedback in certain areas, and teaching them to work, them and the dog, to work more independently of one another.
Correct. Yeah. Work outside our biases.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was certainly interesting to see. And again, you guys got to check that video out. We're going to have a video of the seminar, snippets of it, so you guys can kind of see some of what we're talking about here. Okay, so my next question for you, Cameron, is what should all beginner handlers know? Whether you're starting in a police department, whether you're a new border patrol officer, whatever it is, you're starting with your first detection dog. What should you know? If you had to just say one, you could say a couple things, but the specific things that you should probably know.
Yep. Have patience, and it doesn't happen overnight. You cannot rush this. There's no gas pedal that you want to press on this. You want to go as fast as what's efficient and reasonable for you and your dog. It will not happen quickly. It won't happen in the first 3 months. It's not going to happen in the first 6 months. It takes time. In training, one of the things that we work with is we train for at least 6 months before a dog even does anything on a deployment aspect, because we need to invest that time in the beginning to have a stronger dog to deal with all the different things we might face operationally. So the biggest thing I say is have patience with the training process. You're going to have your highs and your lows, and having patience will have a dog that will actually learn to work despite you, because when you don't have patience, you get involved. And the minute you get involved, that starts to teach the dog, well, then you'll help them out. So have patience and know that this is a time-intensive process.
And you know, it's really interesting he said that, because one thing I was thinking while watching Cameron work was, like, sometimes I would have been like, you know, I'm tempted to step. I was like, if I was running this, I would have stepped in and just been like, either called the exercise or reset. And he was just so he just stood there. He let the handler figure it out. He let the dog figure it out.
Yep.
He let them fail if they had to fail or succeed. And a lot of the times the dogs actually succeeded when he was just relaxed. He just let everything go. And if anything, he told the handlers disengage more, let the dog go, take the leash off, whatever it was. And it was amazing to see the dogs actually improved when you just kind of backed off and let them do their thing.
They are a sensor. I've got to let that sensor do its job.
Yeah, and for me, probably that's the biggest takeaway from this, aside from obviously all the knowledge bombs that he was dropping, was that specific thing of just the patience. Just chill out. You know, you're always in a rush for it to be right and for it to be good, and sometimes just back off.
People always want me as an instructor to help them out, and I'm like, I'm not going to be there in reality. I'll help when I'm needed, but the best thing I can do as an instructor is let them go through the processes of whatever's happening. And I want you to fail with me. I want you to fail in training, so we have less failures operationally, less failures in competition if you do nose work or things like that. I want you to go through those uncomfortable feelings without me helping you. We had, as you got to see, numerous handlers are like, is it here? And I'm like, I don't know, you tell me.
Yeah.
Because I need you, the handler, to have the confidence in what's out there. Don't look to me to help you. Have confidence. And the more you do things like this, and I back away as an instructor, you back off your dog, and we finally have trust.
Yeah, and we saw that in action. It was really interesting to see that. What's the biggest mistake you see new handlers make?
Be involved too much. You want to help your dog out. Mixed in with always putting a hide out. You do not always have to have a hide in your search area. You want to have all clears. The more you teach the dog that you're not a vending machine and you are a slot machine, you'll be far more successful.
And that's a big one. And the temptation is real. The temptation is real. You see all the sexy detection videos on YouTube or on Facebook, and you're like, my dog needs to look like that. He needs to be hammering the odor. He needs to, look slick and fast. And I can definitely identify with that.
They want to get involved. Everybody wants their dogs to win, and we get that. But winning is meaning you have to work hard too.
What's the biggest mistake you see experienced handlers make? Maybe it's the same, I don't know.
I would say it's definitely the same. Always putting something out is one of the biggest things, no matter what experience level. They always want to put a hide out and they want to see their dogs find something. That's a big mistake, not doing enough all clears. The other one sometimes is, not all the cases, but I would just say, I see more of is sometimes they're too hands off. The pendulum went the other way too much. They're not involved at all. And we do have a responsibility to make sure our dogs check things. So they sometimes just stand at a doorway, toss a dog in a room and go, okay, I'm out, versus really starting to be like, okay, my dog didn't search that corner over there. I should probably walk over, at least make sure my dog checked that. So sometimes just being too complacent because they know their dog pretty well. And I would add to that kind of dovetails into not challenging themselves hard enough. Putting things that are much harder to get. It takes more ability to read your dog to make that call versus the typical hides that are always close up to the surface.
Yeah, one of the training problems that Cameron set up, which I found really interesting, was he put a scent box at the top of Mike's ambulance. So it was like right up on the roof rack. So the thing's like 10 foot up. Yep. So it was interesting watching like that. He ran a cop dog, he ran a couple border dogs on it. And it was interesting seeing how the dogs dealt with that and how the handlers dealt with that atypical training problem.
Yeah, absolutely. They had to read their dogs. It wasn't an easy find, but all of them, when they actually stepped away and got away from their dog, it became much easier to read.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see. In North America, because I assume that's specifically where you were.
Yeah.
Okay? What is the state of detection overall?
We are definitely improving, for sure. We are finally accepting science to help us. Science isn't the end-all be-all, but it's a lot more relevant now than it ever used to be. The old methods, in a sense, where it was based on experience, all we had was that. So you had trainers who would give you information based on their experience, but their experience could be limited to the 25, 50, 100 dogs that they trained in their area and that discipline. Now, thanks to the internet and things like this, we're a much smaller world, so information is shared more greatly. And with that came relationships where the scientific community can come in and give us information, data that either match the experience that we had or sometimes conflicted with that. And we have to let go and say, okay, now we have to understand that the data-driven information is a little bit better than the experience information.
And see, that's interesting because it kind of runs counter to, you know, our experience as dog trainers, because I mean, with scent detection and tracking, I guess it's kind of, there's no argument.
Yeah.
It either works or it doesn't work. Whereas with things like obedience training or you know, dealing with behavioral issues, things seem to become a lot more subjective. There seems to be a lot more cool stories, and from my perception, maybe you have a different perception, science is used to actually take away from the experience that you know, I have a saying that when, well, it's not my saying, but it's a saying that I stole, that you know, when science contradicts, you know, objective reality, it's no longer science.
There's, and we also have to remember sometimes science is looking at it within a laboratory setting, which is not exactly matching what we do. There's tons of variables that we deal with that they don't deal with. So science is helpful, which, like I said, and there are certain, you know, mainstays in science like chemistry. So in detection, what an odor does is going to match what science tells us. How a dog perceives it may be a little bit different, and what we realize, dogs are like humans, they're not all the same, so certain dogs perceive things different than other dogs. So even though dogs can detect really, really well, but not all dogs detect at the same levels. We have dogs that can detect parts per trillion, and other dogs parts per million. So
I think it's interesting because what you're talking about is the stems. It's like real science. It's hard facts. Like you can't mess too much with chemistry and all these things. When we start getting into behaviorisms and stuff like that, animal behaviorists, and that's when I think the waters get really muddy with a lot of kind of maybe political,
or they're focusing in on like a certain aspect, and it's not including all the behaviors. It's looking at this behavior.
Myopic.
So then all of a sudden everybody who likes that thing jumps on it and says this is what we do. And again, we're taking away from the whole picture sometimes of the personality of the dog.
You know, I think it's really interesting because that Mike has a little wooden Skinner box over there, and you guys will see it in the video. It's just basically two pieces of plywood that block the dog off from seeing anything other than what's in the box. Now, I'm sure you can achieve all sorts of things training a very specific way in that Skinner box. You go out in the real world, which is where most people exist, and most dogs exist in the real world, that the variables completely destroy a lot of the things that maybe you can accomplish in that sterile environment.
So I utilize a sterile environment at the very beginning just to control a variable of, hey, the only thing that you're going to pay attention to is odor. There's not all other things that you can pay attention to in here besides the odor. And each time you go to the odor, you get reinforced. Then we start building in the distractions like you got to see. I had handlers moving around, reaching in pockets, doing things. So starting there and then building out allows me to have a good solid foundation to then start adding the layers of distraction and difficulty and things like that.
Yeah, it was super interesting. And one thing that I want to jump back on one thing. Cameron was talking about setting up training scenarios where there's no odor. There's no odor to be seen. And I saw him do it multiple times. And what it really made me think about was trial prep for IGP. That's the sport I compete in, right? And if you don't trial prep your dog properly, where your dog actually sees a scenario where he goes on the field, he does obedience and he doesn't get a reward, or he tracks and he doesn't get a reward. All right, guys, so sorry the camera died. So we're just going to kind of pick up from where we were. We were talking about the way Cameron set up some training problems where there was no odor out there. The handlers expected there to be an odor. They took their dog, they ran their dog, and there was nothing. And it was an exercise in kind of teaching the dog how to deal with the fact that there is no odor, and it's not the end of the world if you don't find anything, and the handler as well. You know, how they have to kind of trust the dog and be like, you know what, there isn't anything, there's not always something to find. And that was interesting, and I was relating that to IGP training, where if you don't adequately prepare your dog for trial by showing the dog, hey, it's possible you could go on the field and not be rewarded.
Yep.
Or you could track and not have any food in the track, not have any reward on the articles or any of that kind of stuff. Your dog, you will see your dog fall apart during the trial, where he starts to second guess himself. He starts to, think that something, he'll either go out of control or maybe he'll actually start to lose confidence because the training situation did not prepare him for the real deployment, so to speak.
Yep.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Yep. Yeah, what you're talking about is you don't want to be a vending machine all the time. You want to be a slot machine. And if in training you're always a vending machine, but the real world means there's not going to be something there frequently, the dog's going to think the vending machine's broken. Mm-hmm. But if I create myself to be a slot machine where the possibility is there might be something, there also might not be something, so when I go over here to the real world where that condition does exist, the dog doesn't break down. The dog just thinks it works just like this over here, so I perform the same way over here. So that helps with, like you're bringing up, is also context cues. If you're in IGP and you're training on your home field, the dog knows that context really well. All of a sudden you go to competition and the field is different. There's way more dogs, way more people. Your nerves are in play. All these contexts changed and the dog's like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
So teach the dog in creating some context differentiating aspects, creates a dog who can handle those changes easier than always being the same way, with the same context, being a vending machine versus being a little bit more unpredictable and being a slot machine and putting in work because you'll keep putting money in, knowing that you might get something back out.
And that's the key, it's interesting because again, it's like the big thing for anybody who does IGP is the fear that your dog becomes trial-wise.
Yes.
We call it trial. The dog knows it's a trial. He knows there's no possibility for correction. Mm-hmm. He knows there's no possibility for reward. And there's a complete degradation in the performance based on those things.
Correct.
So it's and the big part of the game, beyond obviously training all the behaviors, is how to set the scenarios up, especially with a more experienced dog, so he doesn't get trial-wise and he stays at his peak performance during the trial. So I saw a lot of similarities in what you were doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlaps between detection and other programs, whether it be, like you said, IGP, monitoring, agility. There's a lot of people who do a lot of sports barn hunt, things like that. All of these have context and context cues, and then when we do things in training, if they don't translate to the potential of what it is in reality, is where we start having problems. So it's important to integrate these things into your training so you have some differences, and then you get reliability in these other situations where context is different.
That's very interesting stuff.
Absolutely.
I also want to jump back to something else because I'm the king of jumping back. Cameron, you mentioned that you were instructor for the Navy SEAL dog unit. What were some of I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it, but what were some of the exercises or training problems that you guys got to do in that role?
I mean, the biggest thing is, I would say, endurance of a dog and a handler. There's aspects where there's a lot of, let's say, movement, or the situation starts at one location and there's a long distance to where an objective might be. And you have to be physically able, and the dog has to be mentally and physically able to withstand this basically lengthy period of time and distance, and then be on its game when it's time to, when you finally get there, to go do its job. And in the world where we have some, let's say, bite aspects or a patrol aspect mixed in with detection, a dog that can switch gears between detection and protection very quickly, because obviously operators in special operations know how to deal with a threat, especially if they're going to have to neutralize a threat. But they're not experts in locating explosive devices. That's where the dog comes in.
Yeah.
So we need a dog that can focus on locating a potential target threat of an odor or explosive device, despite some of the chaos or triggers that might draw them to go after a person who's hiding in a spot. Because again, the operator can deal with that threat, the dog needs to tell them, hey, there's explosive right here. And to deal with those drive conflicts where this is inherently or intrinsically more valuable than this one, but I want you to focus on this one, that is a really strong challenge as a trainer to get through.
So you're telling me you've got to teach these dogs to indicate on odor while in the presence of something they know they can bite.
Yes. You have to deal with that, or you've already engaged and you need to continue clearing a space.
So the dog's done some bite work basically. He's made an apprehension, whatever it is.
Yep.
He's got to come off of that, and then within a couple of minutes start clearing for bombs.
Continue searching for any of the hidden threats. And that's not just unique to a special operations thing. Various law enforcement agencies who deal with high threats have to be able to do the dogs the same way. I've seen it in Europe, I've seen it in the United States, where they have special unit dogs who go out and do a search, do something, and then have to go do, or engage somebody, then have to go do a search.
Yeah, that's really hard.
It is. You're really working with, like I said, something intrinsically really valuable to the dog, which is, I have a lot of fun engaging in a bite, but I have to also go do search for something, locate, tell you, be calm, and then we can go.
It's kind of like, if for humans, it's like if you got into a fist fight and then you had to go do math 5 minutes later.
Very similar. Yeah, very similar.
That would be hard.
Yes. Your adrenaline's pumping, you're jacked, and all of a sudden, okay, calm down, now go do this very diligent type activity.
Do some algebra.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. That's really cool.
It's a challenge as a trainer because you're like, how do I do this? And it starts off back, we talked about selecting the right dogs.
Yes.
Dogs that can be mentally flexible, like I was saying, dogs that didn't get themselves too overly stimulated or motivated, because if they did, they hit that red line, they're way harder to get back down. I needed that dog, just like a good special operations operator, someone that can be calm. Yes. Calm breeds calm. So in the face of all this chaos, they can maintain calmness, which executes the plan they have to do without losing their shit, for lack of a better term. You know, they have to manage all this stress, environmental, maintain control, and get through whatever the operation is safely and effectively.
Yeah, so that's a wrinkle you don't think about.
Yeah.
You know, and I noticed that a lot of the dogs we were getting from Europe were over-the-top drives, over-the-top hunt.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a lot going on up there.
Correct.
And when you started introducing, training problems, when you start introducing things like stimulus control, they really start to fall apart.
Yep.
Not all of them, but a lot of them I was noticing over the couple of years, we were getting these dogs and they were drive monsters, but they were thin up here.
Yeah, they would leak out. They didn't know how to, like you said, impulse control. They didn't know how to do these things so that they would be over threshold very quickly.
Yes.
And they leak in every way. So barking, scratching, spinning, all these different things that we'd see were non-productive to work.
Yes.
So those things were things we learned to avoid for a good, well-trained dog.
Yes. I learned to avoid them too. I ended up getting a couple of these dogs back from agencies and stuff, and at first I was, like, what the heck? And then I said, you know what, I'll work with them. Yeah. And then when I was working, I'm like, you know what, I can see why they struggled at the agencies, because it's like, he's an idiot.
How much more work you have to put in to manage that?
Yes.
And that's the other thing.
Yes, the training was more complicated.
Your time is valuable, and you want to put it in the most effective way or efficient way.
Yes.
And when you have to constantly do management, that's the problem.
Yes. It's okay.
We've been instructed.
No problem. Okay, so Cameron, you were mentioning you have a podcast.
Yes, I do. It's Canine's Talking Sense. It's a podcast dedicated to basically everything detection oriented. So I like to bring on different experts in the field of detection. So individuals from the science background, individuals with extreme wealth of knowledge, of experience of being an operator or being a dog handler for a long time in law enforcement, or specialty detection from like conservation to different environmental aspects, to dogs that find leaks in pipelines. So it's kind of everything from nose work to professional stuff, all of it.
Okay, and you guys can find that where again?
Pretty much on every podcast source. Canines is K9's Talking Sense. So it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, Amazon, all the different ones. Or you can go to our website, fortcanine.com, and just click on podcast, and it's right there.
So those links, guys, are going to be in the description below. Links to Cameron's website, links to his YouTube channel, and links to the podcast. Guys, thanks very much for watching. Thank you, Cameron, for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. And be sure to check Cameron out. Give him a like, subscribe, and a follow. And get out to one of his seminars. You'll definitely learn something. Even if detection isn't your primary interest, you'll 100% learn something. One other thing you guys should look into when you're looking at Cameron is Canine Cognition. Cameron, what's Canine Cognition?
So canine cognition is how does your dog learn? How does your dog problem solve? Is your dog stronger in memory? Is your dog stronger in inference? Knowing just those two things helps you be more efficient as a trainer. This way, if your dog's strong in memory, you know to change things up more frequently. If your dog is a good problem solver, well, maybe it's using you to solve the problem instead of using its nose to solve the problem. So when we do canine cognition testing, we look at how your dog learns, so that way you become better and more efficient in how you train and communicate with your dog.
Okay, and they can find that either in-person seminars or do you have online?
So we're building our online classes for that, but it's much better to do in person because we can go through all the different trials and errors that you might make as a handler when you're testing your dog.
All right, guys, so be sure to check Cameron out for that. Once again, Cameron, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely, thank you very much.
Thank you.